So we'll just start with this one here. And before we even, and I'm actually going to, so that that doesn't distract, just focus on the, I'm going to read this, but any words in this, just vocab that is not familiar or that's unclear, just let you type that into the chat. So, it could be one word, multiple words. So, as a proponent of women's traditional roles, Sarah Hale was adamantly against women's suffrage as thrusting women into an improper sphere. Yet she blanked female textile strikers when they publicly protested their mistreatment at mills. Okay, so we're not even talking about the answer yet, but vocab in here that is not clear. Any words in here? I mean, as I look at these, I'm thinking, there are a bunch of these that would be on, a vocabulary list, I would say. That would be one. We're talking about GRE level vocabulary words. Um, Certainly this one. Maybe that one. Maybe that one. But so I'm not seeing any questions or comments, so I'll take that as a sign that all of these words are basically familiar. One thing I would mention, if you have an adverb like this, and you don't know it, it's not always a big deal. Because usually if you take out an adverb, it's not going to fundamentally change the meaning. I mean, there might be some exceptions, but adamantly in this case just means strongly. A proponent is a supporter, and suffrage is a funny word in the sense that it sounds like this, but there's really no relationship whatsoever as far as I know. I mean, you suffer, you endure something, kind of like I was or have been enduring with my tooth problem. But that has nothing to do with suffrage, which has to do with voting. And so you often see the prefix women's suffrage because they're going to incorporate things from American history. And this was one of these social movements that will often be referenced. Okay, so everyone understands that. Okay, there's going to be one word in here, at least one word that's an important transition. So what would that be? I think somebody is already giving an answer. Um, okay, the semicolon is part of it, and then yet, exactly. Yeah, I would really emphasize that. Yeah, and the semicolon, could be. I think, we could talk about semicolon versus colon, but um, semicolon is a little bit more ambiguous in the sense that it doesn't necessarily tell you. Uh, it doesn't give you the same kind of information that a colon does, for example. A colon tells you, here comes an explanation of the previous portion, or here comes a list or something like that. A semicolon is almost like a little period. Okay, but the yet tells us that we have a contrast. Okay. Now, in the videos, I talk about the keyword. That can be a little tough to identify in a case like this when our blank represents a verb, because it doesn't really make sense to talk about a verb describing something in the same way that an adjective describes something or an adverb describes something. So I don't know that we necessarily have a keyword. We're talking about something that she did. Um, any other words here stand out? I always struggle finding keywords. Okay. Yes. Um, yeah, and I've thought about that more since making those recorded those videos. Oh boy, a lot of them either 2.5 years or 1.5 years ago, mid 21 or 22, depending on which videos. And I would reiterate something I said last week, which is the idea of the keyword is something that um, you don't want it to be to cause you additional problems. We'll see some other examples um, for sure, but it's most it applies most clearly when the blank is an adjective, the word in the blank is an adjective or an adverb. Because again, both of those, an adjective or an adverb, those describe other words. And so in that context, the key word, as I call it, is the word that we're trying to describe. And so it doesn't quite work as well when we're talking about, what we're going to have here is a verb. So I'm going to hold off and even really identifying or trying to identify one here. Now, any other words stand out here as maybe clues? Maybe we'll call it a clue or clues that we can, I'm going to say something in the first part of the sentence is going to be, um, mm, actually, we've got a couple of things going on in the first part of the sentence. We might see, yeah, okay, I'm gonna make a little distinction here. The first part of the sentence indicates one thing. Yeah, she was a proponent of traditional roles. So, like working in the home, taking care of children, taking care of the children, etc. But because she was a proponent or supporter of those things, she was against these less traditional activities. So, in other words, yes, yeah. But I'm going to say that what I would identify here as the real clue that we're going to put together with the transition word is, she was against, I'm going to underline all of this. Okay. But really against, you know, I'm going to kind of combine two things here. We've got traditional roles and then non-traditional things against non-traditional roles. So she supported traditional roles. Yeah. Okay. I'll unveil the answers in just a second. So she's against things like suffrage, or I'll say, voting, participating in politics, and um, protesting. So in other words, I'm going to take these two things and say that they are in the same category. You know, they're not traditional things. For women to be involved in politics, to be publicly protesting in probably the 1700s or 1800s, these would be things that are not traditional. So she supports or is for traditional roles. She's against things that are not traditional yet. So we kind of put these things together and we can think of it as being kind of like a double negative here. Generally, she was against women's suffrage and non-traditional roles, but in this particular case, she did support them. Yeah. And so we want to say something like supported here in the blank. And now we look at the answer choices and we see supported. And then, okay, so the comment here, championed or welcomed. Okay. So we've got a couple of different, okay. We want to keep in mind here that even if, and we saw this last week, if you were here, one that I kind of got caught up on or stuck on, even if a word works in the sentence, it needs to have a word that it pairs with. There needs to be another word that yields the same meaning. And in this case, yeah, which one of these, because I'm seeing challenged and excuse me, I'm seeing championed and welcomed. Which one of those means is closer to supported? I'm seeing a lot of welcome. Yeah. So here we'll go to the dictionary, and if I look up champion, that's going to bring up probably a noun, first of all. Winner of first prize or place in a competition. See, that's the noun form. But the verb, to act as a supporter of, to advocate, to champion. And so that's the one we want here. Yes, champion. Welcomed, I would say, you could welcome someone in your home, you could welcome a visitor, you could welcome an opportunity, but it's not quite the same as supported. I mean, they're positives, and that can be a thing to think about. Which of these have positive connotations? I would say that, that, and that. These, and I would say, would all be negative in a sense. But yeah, I don't think welcomed is quite as good. Um, because really we've got this theme of being for or against, being a proponent or a supporter. Yeah. So again, there's a little bit of again, you can kind of think of it as a double negative in this, if you subtract a negative, it's like you're adding. If you have a contrast word and she's typically against this, well, in this case, she must be for it. Okay, yeah. And then our pairs here, well, we've got yeah, opposed and challenged. I would say that would be a pair. And then we've got two individuals, like criticized and welcomed. Yeah, but our correct answer is going to be B and D on that. Yes. Good. Okay. On to another one. And I've chosen these to, not we're not going with the most difficult vocab in the answers today. Now, this one is not the easiest, but we'll just see. We'll just see. Okay, so first of all, I'll go ahead and read the sentence. So even though the survey course was designated as interdisciplinary, it involved no real blank of subject matter. Okay, so very short sentence, but any questions about vocab in this sentence? And I'll just mention one thing. You probably already know this, but here, I'll ask. What is, as prefixes, what is the difference between inter and intra? Intra. Very good. Very good. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, interdisciplinary is supposed to be, yeah, between two disciplines. I don't uh I don't know that I would, intradisciplinary, but intra and this is different yet again from intro. But yeah, intra means within. Uh, yeah, at colleges, they have intramural sports. That's where you play against groups from within your school, within your college, maybe people from another dorm or another fraternity or something like that, or sorority. But yeah, interdisciplinary. Okay. And then, yeah. Now, as far as transitions go, anything stand out? I'm going to say either one or two words here jump out at me as important transitions or an important transition. And maybe where it falls in the sentence might make it appear to be something other than a transition. Because a lot of times we think of a transition as being right there to connect two things. But I would say it's going to be this. If I had to pick one word, I would say though. But even though together, despite the fact that, or although, or even though. Okay, so even though it was designated or advertised or classified as being interdisciplinary, it involved no real, and you all are already answering this. Okay, yes. No real, yeah. It involved no real interdisciplinary activity. Okay, so yeah, and so I'm seeing a couple of different answers here. And so, yeah, but before we get to the answers, I know you can see them, but before we get to them, let's just try to be clear about what we're looking for here. Um, you could say that we've got, again, this is where it can get tricky to classify these things, and I want these ideas of transition, keyword, clue, etc., to be helpful, not to you to feel like you have to check off every single one. Because if I look at a sentence like this, I mean, is no a transition? I mean, it's not really a transition, but it's something we have to keep in mind. Yeah, and I think the clue here would be that. Okay, so I see understanding, and I'm going to say, we want to steer away from that. And the reason is this, that interdisciplinary, our contrast has to do with the fact that, oh, it was designated as being interdisciplinary. That's a good question. No, and even though, in a sense, yes, that's a good point. Will the shift be canceled out by no and even though? You can think of it that way. Yes. Even though it was designated as interdisciplinary, it involved no real something of subject matter. Yeah, you could think of it this way, as a simplified sort of counterpart to this sentence. The survey course was designated as interdisciplinary. It involved blank of subject matter. Yeah, so in a sense, they do cancel each other out. And so if something is interdisciplinary, it's bringing together or combining aspects of different disciplines, like, I don't know, biophysics, or I don't know, my graduate program, cognitive science, really bragged about being interdisciplinary, computer science, psychology, philosophy, psychology, all that stuff. But yeah, that's what we want. But that's the important thing. And that's why I would say that if you look at this, or you're thinking about, oh, a class, a course, and subject matter, that might make you think of, yeah, understanding or analysis, but we don't have a clue here that points us towards really analysis. It has to do with disciplines and how they fit together and combine with one another. And so those who answered B and D, those are going to be the correct ones. Yeah. So if you fuse, you bring together, if you synthesize, well, synthesis is one of these words that can, you look in the dictionary, we'll look in the dictionary, we're going to see a bunch of different definitions, but the one that we want in this case is going to have to do with bringing together. Uh, yeah, 1A, combination or parts of elements so as to form a whole. Yep, so definition 1A, yes. And so we do have a pair that I wouldn't say is the opposite, but again, it might be, yeah, connected to the idea of subject matter. I'll go ahead. Let's think here. Fusion. Yeah, this is an interesting grouping of answer choices. Because all of the wrong answers have something to do with subject matter. Um, Here, I'll ask you this. What other answer choice would pair with C here? Yeah, that's the question. Ex Exegesis, I hear it pronounced exegesis or exegesis. I I think exegesis is more standard. It's basically it's somewhere between analysis and interpretation. You often hear it in the context of, say, a religious text. If somebody writes an exegesis of some passage from the Bible or the Quran or whatever, they are sort of interpreting it and summarizing um, an explanation or interpretation of a text. Theological scholars have long been preoccupied with interpreting the meanings of various passages in the Bible. Now, here is one way that you could remember the meaning of the word. If Let's see, how do they pronounce it? Exegesis. Exegesis. Well, that's how you remember it. Exegesis. Who's the main person in the Bible? Jesus. So exegesis, Jesus. I feel like I've heard it pronounced exegesis, but exegesis. Yeah. And so I would say that that is actually, I would say that this would be a pair then. Analysis, distillation. Boy, I mean, all four of the incorrect answers have to do with subject matter. So they're not that far off, but distillation, I think of as taking something and simplifying it. You can think of like in chemistry, distillation has a very specific meaning. Uh, let's see, purifying a liquid by evaporation and condensation, or yeah, purifying, breaking down. But it can also mean distillation in the sense of taking something complex and getting to the essence of it, like in words. Um, Yeah, so this one is kind of tricky to characterize the incorrect answers, but what matters are the correct answers. And so synthesis and fusion. And again, those both go together with interdisciplinary. So to reiterate something about incorrect answers, one thing they like to do with incorrect answers is to come up with words that connect to things that are in the sentence, like subject matter or survey course. And you're thinking, hey, class, and I have to analyze or explain things. But it has to connect to an actual clue. In this case, interdisciplinary. Yes. So the growing competition among the science journals for the most important research, and I don't know why that's hyphenated, but anyway, the growing competition among science journals for the most important research may contribute to mistakes and fabrications, even in the most blank of the bunch. Okay, so here's one where I can't, we um, do have a certain kind of keyword because we are trying to describe something. But first of all, though, that's too thick. First of all, transition, even, yes. Yeah, yes, I would say that definitely. Even in the most. So and how do we use even? How would we characterize even? I mean, it's a matter of emphasis, I would say, but yeah, emphasis. It's emphasizing something. So even the ones who maybe try to avoid mistakes. But yeah, hey, but as for an actual keyword, what we're trying to describe, and I'm going to just emphasize that, what we're trying to describe. Um, well, let's think about it. I mean, we've got some different nouns. We've got competition, we've got science journals, we've got research, we've got mistakes, fabrications, we've got bunch. Um, yes, yeah, yeah. So I would say kind of two things, the bunch, but what is the bunch referring to? Mm, I wouldn't say unimportant research. Um, the most important of I would say the bunch in this case is referring to, the science journals. I mean, bunch isn't a pronoun, but it's kind of acting like a pronoun. It's kind of like them. It's referring back to something, the bunch or science journals. And why does this matter? It just tells us what it is that we're trying to describe. In other words, we're trying to describe the journals, you know, more so than the research. And I see the comment there about important, low impact. And that's maybe a little bit of a possible distraction in this case. And let's see if we can make that part clear. So who is competing? The research itself isn't competing. The science journals are competing. Maybe we've got, I don't know, Science and Nature and um, whatever else, physical review or something. I don't know. And they are competing with each other. Yes, they're competing for the most important research, but it's really the competition that that can contribute to the mistakes and fabrications, even in the most right. Good, very good point there. Yes. Yeah. So, and I would say that our clue, if we wanted to, you know, mistakes, fabrications, we could pick just one of those mistakes, but I'm just going to take both of them. Fabrications means if you fabricate something, you sort of create it. So but in this context, it would mean basically making things up. Um, yeah, making things up or being dishonest with the research. So we're trying to describe the bunch, the science journals, and we're saying that even in the ones that are blank, there can be mistakes. So a word that would go in the blank I would say we're looking for something like, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's a, that's an interest. Yeah, that's tough to characterize because I think of even as emphasis, but there is a contrast element to it here. And let's see if we can make sense of that. Um, yes, I'm going to say that we want something like careful here. Careful. Um, and the reason is they're saying this is something that can cause this problem, not just in the ones that are careless, but even in the ones that are careful or cautious, something like that. Yes, even the ones that are generally not prone to make mistakes, even the ones that are generally uh, reliable or careful or, sorry, well, see, it's always nice because I didn't remember the answer and I'm not trying to show up, but it's always nice if you pick a word and then you see it in the answer choices because that means you know that you weren't being misled by the answer choices. or just plugging in a word. Yes. So vigilant is going to be the other one. Yeah, vigilant and careful. So A and D. And then, we have a couple of, well, we have one pair, motivated and ambitious. And that might kind of connect to, I don't know, important competition. I'm not sure. Um, Innovative and unfortunate, I think, are um, individuals. I mean, they're not really, they don't have counterparts. The Leipzig Academy for Painting and Architecture opened in 1764, but its emphasis, in keeping with the city's blank attitude, had become more practical by the end of the 19th century. Now, here I'm going to say that there is a transition word. There's one transition word here that is not that that's but is a transition word. But I want to ask here, is that really the one that we want to focus on? Because not every transition word that appears in a sentence is going to serve as the transition in terms of, getting the answer here. And so, but certainly is a trend. But let's look at what's going on in the sentence. So it opened in 1764, but its emphasis had become more practical by the end of the 19th century. Right. I think the important thing here, I'm going to say it's a three-word phrase. There's a three-word phrase here that is really the important thing. And that three-word phrase, I'll call it a transition. It's a sort of transition. It's, yeah. And I'm letting you think about it. Important. Yeah. I'm going to say that it's this here. And first of all, we want to make sure that we understand what that means. And second of all, why I'm emphasizing that or identifying that as the transition. Yeah. Yeah. In keeping with, it's consistent with, yes. And then emphasis, I would say emphasis is, we have a keyword here. Sorry if my colors are not always the same. I'm not consistent, but yeah, the keyword is emphasis. Because that's what we're trying to describe. Well, let me back that up. Let me back that up. Um, Kind of two things. We could say maybe there's two keywords because one thing is in keeping with the other. One thing is consistent with the other. So we could say, yeah, the emphasis, but also the attitude. And we'll note here that the attitude, we're talking about the city's attitude and the schools, the Leipzig Academy's emphasis. But the reason those go together is this part. And so this can be tricky, but I'm going to say that yes, it is a transition, but it's not the transition that connects our clue to our keyword, et cetera, if that makes sense. And so, well, and then I'm going to say that the clue is going to be in the latter part of the sentence. It is one word. It's an adjective. And, well, they've told us that the emphasis had become more practical. And so that means that the city's attitude is, in some sense, practical or pragmatic. Um, Definitely a vocab word you want to know. Definitely one that I should try to at least write neatly. Um, what is the relationship between pragmatic and practical? I feel like pragmatic describes an attitude or maybe just a person or a pragmatic uh, relating to matters of fact or practical affairs, often to the exclusion of intellectual. Yeah, so practical as opposed to idealistic. Yeah, so a philosopher who is pondering questions about existence and the nature of God and the nature of some other high or abstractions would be, yeah, idealistic. Somebody who is merely concerned with getting things to function on a day-to-day level would be pragmatic. Yeah. And so again, I think this is a good example, and we'll get to the answer, but this is a good example of how not every transition word is going to qualify as a transition in the sense that we're looking at. Okay, yes. Yes. How did I got pragmatic from really from practical. And honestly, I could have just said practical here. And yeah, so the process is like I think probably well, a very important thing is this phrase in keeping with. So in other words, the what they're saying here is the academy's emphasis is in keeping with the city's attitude. Those are consistent with one another. And so what is the city's what is the academy's emphasis, or what did that emphasis become? Uh, Something practical. So in other words, what applies to one applies to the other. Or uh, that's why I said kind of two keywords, because the same kind of adjective is going to describe the city's attitude and the academy's uh, emphasis. Yeah. So again, the but is kind of a distraction here. And so pragmatic, I just picked as a sort of close synonym of practical. But we can notice here that idealistic, that's the opposite of what we want. Um, I don't see another word that pairs with idealistic. Our correct answers here. Okay, so which of these words, and these are kind of tricky because they're got a lot of yeah. Hmm. Some hyphenated little words in here. Which of these means something like practical? Again, I'll bring it back to this pragmatic. Down to earth, matter of fact, practical, businesslike. Businesslike is definitely going to be one of them. We can do some elimination here. Hands off just means you're not getting involved with something. So hands off and non-interventionist would go together. It's just that neither one of those is correct here. If you're not intervening, you're not getting involved, you're keeping your hands off. So businesslike and no nonsense. Yeah. So kind of unusual in that that's informal language. Um, not to say that idealistic and nonsensical are the same, but matter of fact, down to earth, um, utilitarian, um, as opposed to being up and having your heads in the cloud. Oh, there is no nonsense. Yes, no nonsense. No nonsense. Yeah, business-like. You're getting down to business. You're not speculating. You're not, yeah, you're just getting down to the matter at hand. More practical, more no nonsense, etc. Good questions though, and thank you for asking that question. Any other questions on this one? I think we probably have time for a couple more. Well, I'd started a bunch of them that I thought would be good, that wouldn't be too challenging on the vocab, but wanted to have some different kinds of relationships or transitions. So we've got a different transition here, a different one that we haven't seen yet today or last week. What is, and I'm going to say it's one word that signals a very basic kind of relationship between the parts of the sentence. Because, exactly. Yes. Yes. So that tells us that we have a cause and effect relationship. So we don't have uh, any kind of negation or contrast here. So her work. Sorry. Yep. B and E in this one. Businesslike and no nonsense as synonyms of practical. Yes. Yes. Okay, yes. And this is another one that we can say that we do have a keyword. We have something that we're trying to describe. Oh, coming back to that one, we'll come back to the. Don't you think A and F would be more inaccurate? E and F, E and F. Well, no. So on this one, so what I did in green here was to show that, or was trying to indicate that those would have the same meanings as each other. Hands off and non-interventionist. If you intervene, it, if you intervene, you get involved in some kind of situation. Like, let's say, um, I don't want to talk about current foreign policy, but because there's a lot that's going on that's if there's a conflict between country A and country B, and country C decides to get involved, they're intervening. Whereas if they don't get involved, well, they're not intervening. And if they have a policy of not getting involved, that would be a policy of, non-interventionism. So let's see. I think yeah, that is one word. And that, I was trying to say, goes together with hands off. But those are different. Being non-interventionist, being hands off is not the same thing as being practical. Non-interventionist, the state or policy of not intervening. Yep. Yep. And so coming back to the current one, yeah, the thing that we're trying to describe here is basically her work, or we could say the author's work. Yeah, and I would agree that the clue is basically, yeah, loses track of her argument. Yeah, so sometimes the clue can be multiple words, and I would say that's the case here. So to lose track of her line of argument. One of the correct answers has a, you might, well, has a meaning in geometry. That's a hint. Oh, okay. So good question here. I want to emphasize her work includes a number of flaws. Maybe, but that's not the, they would be flaws in a sense, but the main thing is that it doesn't stay. Her work includes a number of, yeah, distractions. Yes, her work includes a number of cases in which she gets off track. Yes, tangents and digressions. And so those could be thought of as flaws, but the important thing here is yes. So um, yeah, just distractions. But I'm just going to go ahead and write tangents. Yeah, tangents and digressions. Um, loophole would be something a little bit different. But we can picture a tangent in the sense of, we've got a circle, and if you're on, let's say that you're going on a circular track. You're on track, you're on track, you're on track. Up, you go off track. You go off on a tangent. And then how does that relate to a digression? A digression, I don't know. A digression is, it's a there's some good words to know that are synonyms. An aside, a digression, a let's see what else they give us here. Um, yeah, the act or instance of leaving the main subject, the act or instance of digressing. But you tend to hear it more as a noun. Yeah, no, I digress, but I digress. No, you hear it as a verb too. Uh, Aside, tangent, excursion. Yeah, diversion is going off track. A loophole is something a little bit different. A loophole is like, let's say that there's a policy or a set of rules, but you manage to find a little thing that they didn't have a rule about. Or, you often hear about loopholes in tax policy, like taking advantage of a little area where there isn't a rule written down. But yes, lessons, morals, descriptions, insights. Yeah. I don't know. I guess that one is fairly straightforward and that we don't have any contrast and it's a fairly short sentence. So one of the strangest aspects of the trend is that it is so blank. The data show, that always catches me. Data is considered plural. The data show that the trend does not slow or stop and restart, but just keeps increasing steadily. Yes, so this is complex, I think, in the sense that there's a lot going on transition wise. Um, um, yes, yeah. The colon, though, would be the first thing that I would emphasize here. Um, yeah, is the colon. Yes. Why is that? Because the colon is a signal. It's a much clearer signal, again, compared to the semicolon. The colon tells us here comes an explanation of the previous bit. Yeah, it's supporting the previous statement. Yeah. And then there's a little part in the second, the part of the sentence after the colon that again is a kind of, mm, it's almost, you can almost cross it out, certain part of it. Um, I mean, let me back up. The key word, the thing that we're trying to describe is, what are we trying to describe here? Yeah, I would say it's the trend itself. Um, you could say strangest aspects of the trend, but I think it's really the trend. What is the trend? It is so blank. And then we get into the second part of the sentence. The data shows that the trend does not slow or stop and restart, but just keeps increasing steadily. So I would say that the real clue is that part. I mean, we could say everything after the colon is serves as one big clue, but if something doesn't stop or slow, but just keeps increasing steadily, that's the important part. So we have a trend that is just kind of, yeah, it's the trend is up and up and up. So it is so constantly increasing. It is so, and this is not very good grammar. It is so constantly increasing. That would be a little bit weird, but we need something that means constantly increasing, and you all are all over it. Okay, and so yes, persistent and relentless. Why would we not say, yeah, positive? I can definitely see how that's a tempting answer here. Let's talk about why positive is not correct. Um, it just keeps increasing steadily. Yes. Anybody have a thought about how we could eliminate positive or why positive? That's a thought. I would actually say there's a different word that pairs with innocuous. These are, yeah, here I'm thinking mathematically about it. Something could be like you're thinking about the XY plane. Something could be negative but increasing. That's one thought. But another thought is that, yeah, persistent and relentless are close synonyms, whereas positive and persistent are not really synonyms. Positive and relentless are not really synonyms. Yeah, it's really more about the fact that it keeps going, that it keeps going. And yeah, but the pair in the incorrect answers, I would not say that it's A and C. Yeah, well, I mean, in this case, I don't know that it would necessarily be a steep slope. It's more that it just continues and continues and continues. So like a persistent effort, if you make a persistent effort on something, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing a whole lot at any one time. It's just that you keep doing it and keep doing it. Right. Because it's it's not slow. I think I think it's really more a matter of the emphasis here. As it says here, it just keeps increasing steadily. Steadily. That's a part of it. Yeah, I think there's multiple factors. One again would be that these are really close synonyms, persistent and relentless. Both of those mean continuing without stopping, continuing steadily without stopping. But on a vocabulary note, we want to make sure there are two words here among the incorrect answers that are synonyms, and they're both really common. And so we want to make sure that we know them. Which two among A, B, C, and D are synonyms of each other? Exactly. Let me just put these in a different color just to show that they're just kind of off on their own. Yes, benign and innocuous. Both of those mean harmless, not harmless, but harmless. And these just seem like well, they don't just seem like it. They appear quite frequently. I, I often feel like I see the word innocuous more in standardized tests than I see it anywhere else. Um, yeah, it shares a root with innocent, innocuous, and then benign. Uh, at some point, we'll talk more about roots, but benign, benevolent, beneficial, benefactor. That root, B-E-N or B-E-N-E, means basically good. Yeah, and benign is also, yeah, and exactly. In a medical sense, benign means, yeah, not harmful. Yeah. So it's kind of like, well, a benign tumor is not necessarily good, but it's not bad in the same way that a malignant tumor would be bad.